Welcome to Shattered Ties, where trust is broken, loyalties are tested, and hidden betrayals come to light. Here, we uncover the darkest sides of family, friendship, and love, stories of deception, greed, revenge, and the quiet pursuit of justice. So sit back, listen closely, and step into a world where every shattered bond leaves a scar. They told him the trust was safe. They said his daughter's future was protected. Then the bank froze her therapy payments and found the signature his wife swore she never gave. By the time her brother walked down the aisle, the confession was already cued. This is the story of a stolen trust, a buried betrayal, and the wedding video that exposed everything. Let's begin. The first time I opened the trust account, I was sitting on the floor beside my daughter's hospital bed, with a paper cup of coffee going cold in my hand. Grace was 7 then, too small for the machines around her, too tired to complain about the tape on her arm, too polite to tell the nurses when she was scared. The settlement had come after the school bus accident. Not enough to undo what happened, because money never does that, but enough to build a wall around her future. Therapy, mobility equipment, college if she wanted it, independence if the world tried to make independence expensive. I named it the Grace Turner Special Needs Trust because the lawyer said that was the correct wording. I hated the phrase special needs. It sounded like paperwork trying to make pain tidy. But I signed where I was told, listened carefully, and made one promise to my daughter while she slept. No one touches this unless it helps you live. My wife cried when I said it. She squeezed my shoulder and told me I was a good father. Her brother stood near the window with his hands in his pockets and said the money would make things easier. I should have noticed that he said money, not Grace. For years, I treated that account like a locked room in a burning house. I checked statements every month. I kept receipts. I questioned charges so small the bank manager once laughed and told me I was thorough. I was thorough because love without documentation is just hope wearing nice clothes. Then life became busier. Grace grew older. The appointments became routine. Handled more bills after my promotion put me on the road. I was grateful, exhausted, and guilty enough to hand her a little more access than I should have. Not trustee access, never that. Just viewing access. Just the ability to upload invoices, coordinate therapy payments, and keep the paperwork moving when I was in another city trying to earn the money that kept everything else afloat. That was what I believed. The week everything changed, Grace was 17 and preparing for her senior art show. She painted in a way that made silence look bright. Her teachers said she had talent. I said she had discipline. Talent is what people say when they want to make hard work sound magical. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, her therapy clinic called me while I was in a hotel parking lot outside Columbus. Mr. Turner, the billing coordinator, said carefully, "We need to discuss the declined trust payment." I thought she meant a card expired. She meant the account had insufficient funds. There are sentences your brain refuses to accept at first, because accepting them would require reconstructing your entire life in real time. Insufficient funds. I told her there had to be a mistake. She apologized with the voice of someone who had already checked twice. I opened the banking app with my thumb shaking against the screen. The balance should have been $418,209. It was $6,714. For almost a full minute, I sat in the rental car listening to rain hit the roof and understood nothing, except that my daughter's future had been emptied while I was busy trusting the wrong people. Answered on the 4th ring. I remember that because on the 1st ring I was panicked, on the 2nd I was angry, on the 3rd I was afraid, and by the 4th I already knew something inside our marriage was preparing to die. "The trust account is almost empty," I said. There was a silence, not long, less than 2 seconds, but silence has texture when you know someone. Silence was not surprise. It was the tiny pause of a person placing her foot on a stair she knew was there. "What?" she said. "The trust, Grace's trust. $400,000 is gone." Calm down. People say calm down when they need time to build a room around the truth. I am looking at the balance. It's probably a bank error. $400,000 is not a rounding problem. She exhaled sharply. "You're scaring me." That sentence did what it was designed to do. It moved the topic from missing money to my tone. Had always been gifted at that. If I said I was worried, she heard accusation. If I asked a question twice, she called it interrogation. If I objected to borrowing our truck for the 3rd weekend in a row, she said I hated her family. For 18 years, I had mistaken emotional misdirection for sensitivity. "Get on the laptop," I said, Open the trust portal. I'm at my mother's. Then use your phone. Her voice softened. Please don't do this over the phone. What did you do? The question came out before I had planned it. Maybe because my body understood before my mind had the evidence. She went quiet again. I didn't do anything, she said. The rain blurred the windshield. In the distance, a family walked into a restaurant under one umbrella, the father holding it too high for anyone to be truly protected. Where is, I asked. What does have to do with this? That was the second pause. I closed my eyes. Vale had been a crisis in human form since the day I met him. Failed restaurant, failed investment company, failed podcast, failed coaching business. Every failure arrived with expensive lessons and no receipts. Called him unlucky. Her mother called him misunderstood. I called him what he was once, after he borrowed money from Grace's birthday savings and forgot to return it. A thief. Did not speak to me for 5 days. Do not call your brother, I said. You can't tell me who to call. If has anything to do with this, he needs a lawyer, not a sister. Her breathing changed. There it was again, not outrage, not confusion, fear. I ended the call before she could turn it into a fight about my cruelty. Then I called the bank. The trust officer, a woman named, was careful from the beginning. Too careful. She confirmed my identity, asked me to verify old security questions, then said she could not discuss recent transactions fully until I came in person. I said, I am the primary trustee. Yes, Mr. Turner's. Was there another trustee added? A pause. I think it would be best if you came to the branch. My hand tightened around the phone. Was my wife added? I can discuss the documents with you in person. Was Vale added? This pause was longer. Please come in tomorrow morning, she said. I drove home that night through 6 hours of rain, and the whole time I kept seeing Grace at 7 years old, asleep beside machines, while adults in another room talked about her future like it was something fragile enough to require guardians. I had been one of those guardians. And somehow, while I was watching the door, someone I loved had passed the key through the wall. Met me at 9 the next morning, in a glass office that looked out over the bank lobby. She was in her 50s, immaculate, with the tired eyes of a woman who had spent her career watching families become animals around money. On her desk were 3 folders, blue, gray, red. I knew the red one was mine before she touched it. Mr. Turner, she said, before we begin, I want to clarify that the bank followed documents presented as valid. When people start with that sentence, I said, it usually means something terrible happened legally. Her face did not change. The trust received an amendment request 11 months ago. No, it didn't. She opened the red folder and turned a page toward me. There it was. My name, my trust, my daughter's money. A trustee amendment allowing limited withdrawal authority to Turner for medical coordination and emergency family support, with secondary authorized agent Vale. Emergency family support. I stared at the page until the letters lost shape. That is not my signature. Folded her hands. It was notarized. I leaned closer. The signature resembled mine the way a mask resembles a face in poor lighting. The N was too narrow. The T in Turner crossed with a straight line instead of my usual downward slash. I did not sign this. There is also a video confirmation. My mouth went dry. What video confirmation? She turned her monitor, clicked through the banking system, and played a short clip recorded in the branch's private signing room. My wife sat at the table, stood behind her in a navy suit, grinning like a man photographed before a successful lie. Beside them was an older notary I did not recognize. On the screen said, "Knows. He's on a work call, but he signed everything last night." The notary asked, "And you are authorized to submit on his behalf?" Lifted a folder. "Yes, he gave me all the documents." Added, "He trusts us. This is for Grace." For Grace. I felt the words enter me like cold metal. "Stop the video." "That is not a video confirmation from me," I said. "No," she said quietly. "It is a branch record of the submission." What happened after that? She opened the gray folder. The first withdrawals were small, almost respectable. Therapy equipment reimbursements, home accessibility modifications, educational support. Then the descriptions changed. Emergency housing, family stabilization, vendor advances. By the 6th month, payments went to Vale Consulting. By the 7th, to Vale Events Group. By the 9th, to a wedding venue on Lake. I looked up. Wedding venue. His eyes softened with professional pity. "My brother-in-law is getting married in 3 weeks." She said nothing. The room around me narrowed. Had proposed to a woman named at Christmas using a ring so large my daughter whispered, "Does he need a permit for that?" Had laughed too hard. Had toasted to second chances. I had wondered privately who was funding the second chance. Because last business had collapsed under lawsuits he described as creative differences. Now I knew. Grace was funding the flowers, the venue, the lakefront cabins, the champagne tower posted about online with the caption, "Manifested Abundance." My daughter's future had become someone else's abundance. "I need copies of everything," I said. Nodded. "We have already escalated internally." When? Her fingers paused on the folder. When the balance dropped below the protected threshold. There was a protected threshold. Yes, per the original trust structure, any balance under 50,000 requires review. Then why did it get to 6? Looked away. Because the amendment overrode the alert routing. Of course it did. Fraud does not always break locks. Sometimes it convinces the lock it has been promoted. I stood with copies of the documents in my hands, and a rage so focused it felt almost calm. Walked me to the door. "There is one more thing," she said. I turned. The signing room camera keeps archival footage for 1 year. After that, it purges automatically. When does this footage purge? Friday. It was Wednesday. For the first time in 24 hours, something in me sharpened into gratitude. They had stolen almost everything, but they had left me 48 hours. I found Grace in the art room after school. That was what she called the spare room at the back of our house, the one with north-facing windows and paint on the floorboards no amount of scrubbing could erase. She sat at her easel in a gray hoodie, her hair clipped carelessly on top of her head, one leg braced in the orthotic she hated and needed. She was painting a street at night. One window lit, everything else dark. "Hey, Bug," I said. She glanced over. "You only call me that when something is either very good or very bad." I tried to smile, failed. She set down the brush. Grace had been reading rooms since she was 7. Hospitals do that to children. They learn adult faces before multiplication tables. "What happened?" she asked. I had spent the drive home deciding how much to tell her. Not everything. Not yet. Children deserve truth, but they also deserve timing. At 17, Grace was not a child in the legal sense for long, but she was still my daughter, and every protective instinct I had wanted to wrap the facts in cotton before handing them over. "The trust account has a problem," I said. Her eyes moved to my hands. "The folders." "What kind of problem?" "Money was withdrawn that should not have been withdrawn." Her face changed slowly. "For my therapy. For a lot of things that weren't you." She looked toward the window. The winter trees beyond it were black against the afternoon. "How much?" I sat on the stool beside her. "Most of it." Grace did not cry. That would have been easier for me. She looked at the painting and nodded once, as if confirming an answer she had been afraid was coming. "Mom," she asked. I closed my eyes. She submitted documents. "And uncle's?" I opened my eyes. Grace's mouth had tightened. "You knew?" "No, I guessed." "How?" She picked at dried paint on her thumb. Mom kept asking if I really needed the new GATE training program. She said maybe we were all too dependent on therapy. Then Uncle joked that I was lucky because I had money waiting for me before I even had a job. I felt something inside me go very still. When? Thanksgiving. 4 months earlier. I remembered Thanksgiving. Carving the turkey even though it was my house. Fussing over ring ideas. Grace quiet at the end of the table, pushing peas around her plate. I had asked if she was tired. She said yes. She had not been tired. She had been listening. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. She looked at me then, and the answer was already in her eyes. "Because you get that face when it's about Mom." "What face?" "The face where you decide it's not as bad as it sounds because if it is, then you have to admit she knew it would hurt me." I had no defense against that. There are moments as a parent when your child shows you the exact shape of your failure, and the worst part is not that they are angry. It is that they are accurate. "I'm sorry," I said. Grace shrugged, too small a movement for the size of the wound. "Did I do something?" "What?" "To make her think I didn't need it." I went cold. Number Grace, no. She used to say I was brave. Then after got engaged, she started saying I was stronger than we thought. Like needing less was a compliment. I knelt in front of her chair, because some truths require you to be lower than the person receiving them. "Listen to me, you did not cause this. Your needs did not burden anyone into stealing from you. If someone took money meant for your care and called it family, that is not your shame." Her eyes filled but did not spill. "Is the art school account gone too?" I did not know yet. That was answer enough. She turned back to the painting. The lit window looked suddenly like a warning. "Don't let them apologize and keep it," she said. I looked at my daughter, 17 years old, already negotiating the terms of betrayal with more clarity than I had managed in 18 years of marriage. "I won't." She picked up the brush again, though her hand shook. "And Dad?" "Yes. If Mom cries, remember she cries at commercials." I laughed once badly. Grace smiled without looking at me. That was the moment I stopped thinking of this as a marital crisis. It was theft from my daughter. Everything after that became simple. Ant's wedding website was a crime scene with calligraphy. Grace showed it to me after dinner. She had found it months earlier, she admitted, because kept posting countdown photos and tagging vendors like gratitude could be monetized. The website opened with a drone shot of Lake Estate, a private venue with stone terraces, glass walls, and a dock lit by lanterns. The headline read, "Finally, our abundance season." I wanted to throw the laptop through the wall. Grace clicked through the pages, with the brutal calm teenagers reserve for adults who disappoint them. Weekend welcome dinner, sunset rehearsal cruise, champagne brunch, luxury cabin block, live string quartet, floral installation, custom documentary team. Documentary team, I asked. Says wedding videos are basic, so they hired people to make a short film. Of course they did. A fraud large enough to bankrupt a disabled girl deserved aerial footage. I took screenshots of everything. "Dad," Grace said. I looked up. "Don't do something that gets you arrested." "I'm not going to hit him." I didn't say hit. She knew me too well. I spent that night building a timeline. Not emotionally. Technically, date of amendment, date of first withdrawal, vendor names, wedding deposits, business filings, posts, messages, every lie needed a pin through it. At 1:17 a.m., I found the lake payment schedule buried in a tagged story, had saved under bridal blessings. She had filmed herself opening a gold envelope from the venue. First deposit due, 11 months ago. Same week, submitted the trust amendment. Second deposit, 7 months ago. Same day Vail Consulting, received $42,000. Final payment, 3 weeks ago. Same day Grace's art school application fee bounced. I sat at the kitchen table until dawn, copying dates into a spreadsheet while slept upstairs in our bed. She had not come home until after 8. When she did, she walked in carrying groceries and the expression of a woman trying to perform normal before the audience had seated itself. "We need to talk," she said. "No," I replied. "We need a lawyer. Talking was for before you forged a trust amendment." Her face collapsed. "I didn't forge anything. You submitted it. I thought you understood." That was draining Grace's trust for his wedding. She flinched. There, the word wedding found the wound. "It wasn't like that," she said. "It was exactly like that." Was desperate. So was Grace when she learned her therapy payment bounced. Set the groceries on the counter. A carton of eggs rolled from the bag and cracked on the floor. Neither of us moved. "You don't understand what my family is like," she said. "I've been married into it for 18 years. "No, you've judged it for 18 years. Because it keeps needing judgment." Her eyes sharpened. "That money has controlled this family since the accident. Everything became about Grace. Her appointments, her comfort, her future. Needed one good thing. One. And you acted like every dollar not spent on therapy was a betrayal." I stared at my wife. There are sentences that end marriages immediately, even if the paperwork takes longer. "Every dollar not spent on Grace from Grace's trust," I said slowly, "is a betrayal." Looked away. He was going to pay it back. How? After the wedding, his father is investing in his new company. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the structure was familiar, always had money coming later. Later was his religion. Everyone else funded the offering. "Did Grace know?" I asked. His face hardened. "She's a child. She's the person you stole from." I protected her from adult stress. "No, you protected from consequences." She picked up the broken eggs with shaking hands. "I will not let you ruin his wedding." That sentence told me everything I needed. Not "I'll fix the trust." Not "I'm sorry." Not "How is Grace." I will not let you ruin his wedding. I looked at the laptop, still open to the wedding website. I said, "You ruined it the moment you paid for it with our daughter." My lawyer's name was Helena Park, and she had the kind of office that made panic feel underdressed. Glass shelves, white walls, no family photos. One green plant that looked too disciplined to be alive. She specialized in trust litigation, financial abuse, and family asset disputes, which meant she spent her days professionally confirming what people did to each other when nobody outside the house was watching. I handed her the folders. She read without interrupting. That alone made me trust her. People who interrupt evidence usually want control. Helena wanted sequence. When she finished, she removed her glasses and said, "This is not a misunderstanding. I know. I'm saying that as a legal assessment, not emotional support. That's the kind I need." She tapped the amended trustee document. "Your signature is questionable. The notary's role is questionable. Your wife's statements to the bank are questionable. Vail receiving funds as a vendor while also benefiting personally from the wedding payments creates a very ugly pattern. Ugly enough for court. Ugly enough for emergency injunction, forensic accounting, and referral to law enforcement if the facts hold." I felt something like relief, which shamed me. Relief that the betrayal was legally large enough to matter. Helena continued, "We need preservation letters today. Bank footage, branch logs, notary records, internal emails, vendor payment trails, and communications between your wife and any wedding vendors. The footage purges Friday." "Not after my letter." She said it with such calm violence that I almost smiled. Then she asked the question I had been avoiding. "Is your daughter safe at home?" I looked up. "Physically, yes." That's not what I asked. I thought of Grace asking if she had done something wrong, framing theft as protection, joking about her money at Thanksgiving. "No," I said, "not emotionally." "Then you need to decide where she stays while this moves." "She lives with me." "And your wife's?" I looked at the trust document again. "My wife can live with her brother's abundance." Helena nodded once, not approving, simply recording. By noon, letters went out. By 2, the bank confirmed footage preservation. By 4, Helena's investigator had located the notary. Retired, semi-private, currently renting office space from a cousin of's. Of course, corruption loves family networks, because everyone calls conflict of interest loyalty until subpoenas arrive. When I came home, was packing. Not apologizing, packing. 2 suitcases stood near the stairs. Grace watched from the hallway in silence, saw me and lifted her chin. "I'm staying with Mom until you can speak to me like a husband." "Good, I'll speak through counsel." Her face flushed. "You're enjoying this." "No. You've always wanted a reason to hate." I wanted reasons to be wrong about. He kept refusing to provide them. She turned toward Grace. "Honey, please don't let your father make this uglier than it needs to be." Grace stood very still. "Mom," she said, "you took my medical money." Closed her eyes as if Grace had been rude. "It was temporary. You took my medical money for Uncle's wedding. It was more complicated." Grace nodded slowly. "No, that's the part that's simple." His face crumpled. Tears gathered fast, practiced by years of family emergencies in which her pain always outranked the damage. "I have loved you like my own body," she whispered. Grace's voice stayed soft. "Then why did you sell pieces of my future to buy flowers?" Made a sound like she had been struck. I stepped between them, not because Grace needed protection from words, but because needed to learn she could no longer spend grief like currency in this house. "Leave," I said. She looked at me with hatred so naked it almost felt honest. "You are going to destroy this family." "No," I said. "I'm just going to stop letting it use Grace as collateral." After she left, Grace sat on the bottom step for a long time. I sat beside her. "She'll say I turned against her," Grace said. "She'll be wrong. She'll believe it." "Probably." Grace leaned her head against the banister. "I hate that I still want her to call me. That broke me more than the bank balance. Because theft is clean compared to attachment. You can trace theft, you can freeze accounts, you can file motions. But love for someone who harmed you does not freeze on request. It keeps moving through the body, looking for the person who used to deserve it." Sent flowers to my office the next morning. Not to Grace, not to me. The card read, "Brother, let's not make family mistakes permanent. We can fix this like men." The arrangement was white lilies, which smelled like funerals and expensive lies. My assistant, Nora, placed them on my desk with the expression of a woman trying very hard not to ask questions that HR had not trained her for. "Trash," I said. "The card too. Especially the card." She smiled a little. "Bad day. Bad relatives. Those last longer." She took the flowers away. At 10:04 called. I let it go to voicemail. He called again, then my mother-in-law. Then, whose number I only had because she once texted me a link to the wedding registry with the message, "No pressure, Uncle Nate, just love." By lunch, my phone looked like a family reunion hosted by creditors. I forwarded everything to Helena. At 1:20, appeared in the lobby. Nora called me from reception. There's a man here who says he's your brother. I don't have one. I had a feeling. I went down because part of me wanted to see what desperation had done to his face. Stood near the security desk in a camel coat and polished shoes, looking exactly like a man who had purchased confidence on credit. He smiled when he saw me. Nate, leave. Come on, 5 minutes. You stole from Grace. His smile tightened. Keep your voice down. Why, I asked. Does theft work better quietly? The security guard looked up, stepped closer. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. I understand you spent my daughter's trust on a lakefront wedding. It wasn't supposed to stay gone. Money always says that when thieves speak for it. His eyes hardened. Good, the charm was cracking. Agreed. There it is. What? The part where you hand your sister the knife and call it teamwork. Lowered his voice. She wanted to help me because she knows what you're like. Controlling, judgmental, always acting like Grace is the only person in the world who matters. I looked at him for a long moment. She is the only person in the world whose trust you drained. You think you're so righteous. His face flushed. You built an altar around that account. Every family dinner, every decision, every plan had to bow to Grace's accident. Do you know what it's like being in a family where one tragedy gets to own every room? I felt the air leave my lungs. There it was. The real resentment beneath every joke, every temporary loan, every eye roll when Grace needed extra time getting into a car. You were jealous of an injured child, I said. He laughed once, ugly and surprised. Don't twist my words. I don't have to. He stepped closer. If you try to stop this wedding, father will pull his investment. If that happens, I can't pay anything back. You'll hurt Grace more. That was genius. He could rob you, then make the return of your property dependent on your continued cooperation. No, I said. You're done using her as a hostage. His phone buzzed. He looked down, then back at me. Lawyers cost money, Nate. So do divorces. So does therapy. Think carefully before you start a war you can't afford. I leaned in. The war started when you looked at Grace's future and saw a wedding budget. Security escorted him out. That afternoon, Helena called. The bank responded. And we have the signing room footage. We also have something better. What? Parking lot camera. Carrying a folder from your wife's car to the notary's car before the appointment. I closed my eyes. Anything else? Yes, Helena said. The bank preserved lobby audio by mistake. Audio. Partial, but enough. I looked at my office door, beyond which Nora was probably pretending not to worry. What does it catch? Helena's voice sharpened, saying, and I quote, once Nate sees the wedding already paid for, he'll scream, then fold. He always folds when cries. I almost smiled, not because it felt good, because had made the same mistake all parasites make eventually. He had mistaken the host's patience for consent. Called me that evening, while Grace and I were eating takeout noodles at the kitchen island. Grace saw the name on my screen and raised an eyebrow. Put it on speaker. No, coward, responsible adult. I answered in the hallway. Did not say hello. I don't know what told you, but you need to understand this wedding is paid for. Not I'm sorry. Paid for. That was the altar everyone kept circling. This doesn't involve you unless you accepted stolen funds. A delicate laugh. That's dramatic. So is a champagne tower, funded by a minor's disability trust. Silence. I didn't know that, she said. The sentence came too quickly, wrapped in shock but not built from it. Then you should have no problem postponing while investigators sort it out. Do you have any idea what non-refundable means? I looked back toward the kitchen. Grace was pretending not to listen while listening with her whole body. I'm learning what family refundable means. His voice sharpened. Told me you were controlling. Told a bank he was an emergency family support vendor. He was trying to survive. Grace was trying to walk without pain. You're making me sound heartless. No, I'm letting you hear yourself. She inhaled sharply. My father has already invited clients. The documentary team arrives Thursday. We have guests flying in from 3 states. This isn't some backyard party you can cancel because you're angry at your wife. There it was again. My wife, my anger, never the theft. Tell your father to call Helena Park, I said. Who? My attorney. His voice dropped. That's cruel. No, cruel is asking Grace to fund your first dance. I ended the call. Grace looked at me when I returned. She knew. She knew enough to defend the deposits. Grace nodded and pushed noodles around the carton. Do rich people hear themselves? Not if the room keeps applauding. The next day, the room stopped applauding. Helena filed the emergency petition. By afternoon, consulting accounts were frozen. By evening, Lake Estate received notice that payments connected to the wedding might be subject to recovery. By night, wedding website went password protected. Not deleted. Password protected. A perfect metaphor for shame. Still there, just hoping fewer people can see it. Called at 9:43 p.m. I answered because Helena said documenting emotional responses might matter later. Also because some part of me still wanted to hear my wife choose our daughter. She did not. You humiliated, she said. Grace's account has $6,000 left. You froze his business. He used a fake business to invoice the trust. You called the venue. My lawyer called the venue. Do you hear yourself? You're enjoying power. I looked at the dark kitchen window and saw my reflection. Tired, gray at the temples, holding a phone like it weighed more than it did. I'm enforcing a boundary. No, you're punishing me. For stealing from Grace. For not asking your permission to help my brother. That sentence opened the final locked door. In his mind, the crime was not theft. The crime was disobedience. She had decided Sneed outranked Grace's legal protection, then framed my objection as authoritarian. I said, "Did you sign my name?" Silence. "Did you sign my name?" I traced it from an old tax form. My hand tightened around the phone. The confession arrived so softly, it almost passed itself off as explanation. Say that again. No. I was scared, she cried. Was going to lose everything. His father would have walked. Mom was crying every night. You would have said no because you always say no unless it's about Grace. Because it was Grace's money. It was family money. The kitchen went silent around me. There are lies people tell intentionally, and then there are beliefs so corrupt they confess without knowing. Family money. I started recording halfway through the call. I wished I had started sooner, but halfway was enough. Grace's art show opened 2 days after confessed. I tried to convince her to skip it. She refused with the icy politeness of someone who had decided adults would not be allowed to ruin one more thing that belonged to her. It's my show, she said. They can have the lawsuit. So we went. The school gallery was a converted library with white walls and bad fluorescent lighting. Parents wandered between canvases holding plastic cups of lemonade, saying thoughtful things about colors they did not understand. Grace wore a black dress, her brace visible beneath the hem, and stood beside her work with the expression of a person daring anyone to pity her. Her main piece hung at the center. The painting showed a dining table covered in wedding flowers. Beneath the table, roots grew into a hospital bed. At the far end, a girl sat holding an empty bowl while adults toasted above her. The title card read, "Temporary." I stood in front of it too long. Grace came beside me, too subtle. "No. Good." A woman behind us whispered, "Powerful." Grace whispered back, "Expensive." I coughed to hide a laugh, then walked in. She came alone, which meant had enough survival instinct to avoid a school full of witnesses. She wore a cream coat and the pale, wounded face she used at funerals. The room noticed her before Grace did. When Grace turned, something passed between them that I could not name. Not hatred, not longing, something worse, reassessment. Approached slowly. "Your work is beautiful," she said. Grace nodded, "Thanks. I wanted to support you. You could have done that with my trust." A few heads turned. His eyes filled immediately. "Please don't do this here." Grace looked around the gallery. "Why, you did it in a bank." The room went quiet enough for the fluorescent lights to hum. I stepped closer, but Grace lifted one hand. Not to stop her mother, to stop me. This was hers. Lowered her voice. "I made a mistake." Grace looked at the painting. "A mistake is forgetting my allergy at a restaurant. You made a plan." I was under pressure. So was I when my payment bounced. His mouth trembled. "I love you." Grace's expression softened. And for one dangerous second, I thought she might collapse into the need that still lived beneath her anger. "I know," she said. "That's why it hurts more." Cried then. Real tears, maybe. It was getting harder to tell and less important to know. She left before awards were announced. Grace won Best in Show. When the principal called her name, she walked slowly to the front with her brace clicking softly under the applause. She accepted the certificate, looked out at the room, and said into the microphone, "This piece is about what happens when adults call theft temporary because they plan to apologize later." No one knew whether to clap. Then someone did. Then everyone did. I clapped until my palms hurt. That night, Grace taped the certificate to the refrigerator and went upstairs without saying much. I stayed in the kitchen and listened to the voice memo of his confession 3 times. Each time I heard something new. Not legally, emotionally. I was scared. You would have said no. It was family money. Behind every phrase was a house I had lived in for years without noticing the foundation was cracked. Had not betrayed her values. She had revealed them. At midnight, Helena called. You were right to record. Is it usable? Potentially, but more importantly, it confirms intent. What happens next? We push for full restitution before the wedding. And if they refuse? Helena paused. Then weddings are public events. I looked at Grace's painting certificate on the fridge. For the first time, the idea entered me fully. Not violence, not revenge for its own sake, exposure, and had built a stage with stolen money. Maybe the cleanest justice was letting them stand on it, while the invoice read itself aloud. Attorney sent the offer 3 days before the wedding. Helena forwarded it to me with no message, which meant she wanted me to experience the insult before she explained it professionally. The offer was simple. Would acknowledge improper borrowing, repay $75,000 over 5 years, and return the rest after his new business reached profitability. Would complete financial boundaries counseling. His family would proceed with the wedding without interference. In exchange, I would withdraw the emergency petition, stop communicating with vendors, and agree not to make public statements about the matter. Public statements. That was the phrase that mattered. They were not afraid of court yet. Court was slow, private enough, full of delays and language. They were afraid of guests in tuxedos learning what funded the orchids. Grace read the offer beside me at the kitchen table. Improper borrowing, she said. Apparently. Can I improperly borrow car into a lake? No. Legal system has flaws. I laughed despite myself. Then she reached the repayment section and stopped smiling. 5 years. I nodded. I'll be 22. I know. My leg won't pause for 5 years. I know. She pushed the paper away. No. It's your trust, I said. Your opinion matters. It's not an opinion, it's my life. I called Helena. Reject it, I said. I already did. Then why send it? So you'd remember who they are. That afternoon, Helena filed an expanded complaint naming Vale Events Group and the notary. By evening, the wedding venue's general counsel requested an urgent call. By midnight, his father hired his own attorney and began distancing his money from S. The abundance season was developing weather. At 7:30 the next morning, arrived at my house. My mother-in-law had always entered rooms like she was checking whether they had been cleaned to her standards. She wore pearls to grocery stores and once told Grace that posture was free, which was both false and cruel. I opened the door, but did not invite her in. She said, "This has gone far enough." It went far enough when the trust balance hit $6,000. Her lips tightened. Grace is not the only person in this family who has suffered. She is the only one whose medical fund paid for a wedding. You always make everything sound vulgar. It is vulgar. She glanced past me, searching for Grace. Where is my granddaughter? Safe. I have a right to speak to her. No. Her face hardened. There was skill, older and sharper, the ability to turn denial into persecution. You have poisoned that child against her mother. Her mother forged documents. Panicked. Traced my signature from a tax form. His eyes flickered. She had not known I knew that. Families handle things privately, she said. Healthy families don't require victims to protect reputations. Victims, she almost spat the word. You enjoy that word. It makes you powerful. No, it makes Grace accurate. Leaned closer. If you humiliate at his wedding, you will lose forever. There it was, the final card. For weeks, everyone had assumed was the prize I was trying not to lose. Wife, family, marriage, history. But sometimes, the person you are afraid of losing has already left. They just keep living in your house until proof catches up. I lost when she decided Grace's trust was family money, I said. Looked genuinely shocked. Then what do you want? I thought of Grace painting a table whose flowers grew from a hospital bed. I thought of his voice in the bank lobby. I thought of saying she had traced my signature because I would have said no. I want the money back, I said. I want the truth recorded. And I want every person who helped themselves to Grace's future to stop calling silence love. Stepped back as if the doorway had become unsafe. You'll regret this. Maybe, I said, but Grace won't pay for it. She left. I watched her car disappear down the street and understood something important. Their whole family had been built on the same rule. Whoever suffered most quietly was called mature. Grace and I were done being mature. But the wedding was not canceled. That surprised me at first. Then it didn't. People who spend stolen money on spectacle rarely surrender the spectacle voluntarily. They believe beauty can outrun origin if enough guests photograph it. Lake Estate sent Helena a carefully worded message explaining that, absent a court order directly prohibiting the event, they were contractually obligated to proceed. His father filed a declaration stating he had personally covered substantial independent costs and was unaware of any trust misuse until recently. The accounts remained frozen, but the venue had already been paid. The stage was built. Helena advised me not to attend. Grace advised the opposite. "You should go," she said while cleaning brushes in the sink. "No, but you're invited." I was invited before they knew I had evidence. Even better. "Grace." She turned off the water. "Dad, they're going to stand there in front of everyone and pretend this wedding is love. Mom will cry. Grandma will tell people you're unstable. We'll make jokes. We'll post slow-motion footage. And everyone will go home thinking maybe it wasn't that bad because it looked expensive and nobody said the truth out loud." I dried my hands slowly. "You shouldn't have to think like this." I had to think like this because they did. That settled it. We made a plan with Helena. Not a reckless plan, not a dramatic ambush that would damage the case. A lawful presence, documented, with evidence already filed and copies already in the hands of counsel. If confronted, I could state the facts. If asked to leave, I would leave. If spoke publicly about the matter, I could respond. The key word was if. Provided it himself. At 10:12 p.m. the night before the wedding, he posted a video to his private guest feed. Someone sent it to Grace, who sent it to me with no comment. In the video, stood beside the lake with string lights behind him. "Tomorrow," he said, "we celebrate love, family, and the people who show up when life gets hard. Some people tried to bring negativity into this weekend. And I believe abundance is stronger than bitterness." Abundance. There it was again, wearing cologne. He continued, "To everyone who stood by us instead of judging from the outside, thank you. Family isn't about perfect choices. It's about forgiveness." I sent the video to Helena. She replied. He opened the door. The next morning, I put on a dark suit. Grace sat at the kitchen table in pajamas, eating cereal from a mug. "You sure you don't want to come?" I asked. She looked at me, as if I had suggested she lick a battery. "I'd rather staple my eyelids." "Fair." She slid something across the table. A small print of her painting Temporary. On the back she had written, "For the invoice." I tucked it into my inside jacket pocket. When I arrived at Lake, the venue looked like a magazine spread designed by a criminal with excellent taste. White flowers climbed the arch. Crystal glasses lined the bar. A harpist played near the terrace. Guests in linen and silk moved through the lawn as if nothing beneath it was rot. Saw me first. She wore a champagne dress and a face full of alarm. "You came," she said. "I was invited. Please don't do this." "Do what?" Her eyes filled. "Ruin everything." I looked past her at the flowers, the lake, the drone camera rising softly above the dock. I said, "Everything here is already ruined. I'm just the first person willing to say why." She grabbed my sleeve. "I am begging you." For us." I removed her hand gently. "There is no us where Grace is collateral." Before she could answer, appeared in a white dinner jacket, smiling for 2 seconds before he realized I was not a hallucination produced by guilt. "Nate," he said. His jaw flexed. "Today is not the day." "No," I said. "Today is exactly the kind of day people like you rely on." The videographer turned slightly toward us. "Noticed." And because could never resist performing dominance for an audience, he smiled wide and clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Family drama," he said loudly. "Good thing we believe in forgiveness." I looked at the camera, then at him. "If you want forgiveness," I said, "start by returning the money you stole from Grace." The harpist missed a note. Laughed. That was his first mistake. It was not a comfortable laugh. It was too loud, too sharp, a champagne glass cracking under pressure. But guests turned, and once he had their attention, he did what always did. He tried to make himself the most charming person in the disaster. "Nate S. had a rough week," he said. "Family finances can be emotional." "Trust theft is emotional," I replied. Whispered my name like a warning. Arrived then, white dress lifted slightly above the grass. Her face arranged in bridal serenity and private fury. "What is happening?" she asked. "Your groom is explaining why Grace's medical trust paid your venue." The videographer lowered his camera, but did not turn it off. Looked at, "Handle this. Not deny it. Handle this." Guests were no longer pretending not to listen. A cluster of cousins near the bar stared openly. Stood by the flower arch, pale with rage. His father, A heavy man with silver hair and courtroom eyebrows walked toward us with the slow certainty of someone used to problems moving aside. "Mr. Turner," he said, "this is inappropriate. So is the funding source. I suggest you leave before security becomes involved. Ask where the lake deposit came from." His eyes moved too, held up both hands. "This is being handled legally." His father went still. That was the moment I realized may have known, but her father had only known the sanitized version. Wealthy men hate being surprised in public. They hate it almost as much as being implicated. The ceremony coordinator approached with a headset and a smile dying on her face. "We're ready to begin. Seize the escape." "Great, everyone's seats. Nate, we can talk after." "No," I said. Helena had told me not to create a scene. Guest video and public statement had opened a narrow door. But there is a difference between walking through a door and setting the house on fire. So I stepped aside. "After," I said. Looked relieved. That was his second mistake. The ceremony happened under an arch paid for by fraud. Smiled beautifully. Cried at the vows. He promised honesty, protection, partnership, and sacred stewardship. At sacred stewardship, I heard Grace's voice in my head. Do rich people hear themselves? Apparently not. During the cocktail hour, my phone buzzed. Helena's father's attorney just called me. He wants copies. Me's now. Helena, now. I looked across the terrace. His father stood alone near the lake, phone at his ear, no longer watching the bride. Good. At dinner, took the microphone first. I had expected his father, maybe a best man, but had never met a microphone he did not believe was waiting for him. He thanked guests. He thanked vendors. He thanked for believing in him before the world saw his greatness, which made several people clap and one groomsman shout, "Visionary." Then looked at my table. "To family," he said, smiling. "Even when they doubt you, even when they misunderstand your journey, even when they count every mistake you've ever made and forget the heart behind it." Closed her eyes. He continued, "Some people think money is the measure of loyalty. I think forgiveness is." The room murmured approvingly. That was the third mistake. He had made the allegation moral, public, on microphone, in front of witnesses. He had framed the theft as a misunderstanding and himself as the wounded party. Helena's text arrived like permission. He opened it wide enough. I stood. The room turned. His smile froze. I walked to the small table where the DJ had set up beside the dance floor. The DJ, a young man with anxious eyes, looked at me and said, "Sir." I handed him a flash drive. "Play file 1, I said. Moved fast. "Nate, don't." But's father stood at the same time. "Let it play," he said. The room went silent. The speakers crackled. His recorded voice filled the ballroom. I traced it from an old tax form. Someone gasped. Then my voice from the call. "You signed my name." On the recording, crying now. I was scared. Was going to lose everything. You would have said no because you always say no unless it's about Grace. The room stopped breathing. The first toast had ended. The trial had begun. The DJ looked like he wanted to dissolve into his headphones. I did not blame him. He had been hired for first dances and drunken ants, not evidence playback. But he kept the volume steady, eyes locked on his father, who stood with both hands braced on the table, as if physically holding himself back from lunging at the groom. His voice continued through the speakers. It was family money. A sound moved through the room. Not shock exactly. Recognition. The sound people make when a vague discomfort becomes a fact with a timestamp. Shouted, "Turn it off." "No," his father said. Turned on him, "This is private." The older man's face hardened. "Not if I paid into it." Stood frozen beside the head table, bouquet still in her hand, looking less like a bride than an actress realizing the script had changed genres. The audio ended. I nodded to the DJ. File 2. Lunged toward the table, but one of his brothers grabbed his arm. Not violently, firmly enough. File 2 was the bank lobby audio. His voice came through, slightly tinny but clear enough. "Once Nate sees the wedding already paid for, he'll scream, then fold. He always folds when cries." The room's silence changed texture, made a small sound behind me. I did not look back. Stared at the speakers, as if they had betrayed him personally. Then file 3 played. Video this time. The projector screen behind the sweetheart table, previously used for of engagement photos, filled with bank footage. At the signing table. Behind her, the notary, the folder. The clip had no dramatic music. That made it worse. Real betrayal is rarely cinematic while happening. It is fluorescent lights, a pen, and someone saying, "He trusts us." On screen, leaned toward the notary and said, "This is for Grace." In the ballroom, someone whispered, "Oh my God." The screen cut to parking lot footage, carrying the folder from car to the notary's car, then to withdrawal summaries. Vale Events Group, Lake Estate, floral installation, documentary deposit, cabin block. Each payment dated, each amount displayed. I had not made the Helena's investigator had. It was devastating because it was boring in the way undeniable things are boring. No adjectives, just documents. Found his voice. This is edited. Helena's voice answered from my phone, connected to the microphone by the DJ with trembling hands. It has been filed in court with source records preserved, Mr. Vale. Several guests turned toward me. I held up the phone. My attorney sat down slowly. Her father walked too. "How much?" he asked. Wiped his mouth. "This is not the place." How much of this wedding was paid with that child's trust? Looked toward. There it was again. The instinct to pass the blade back to the woman who had carried it in. Stepped backward. "No," she whispered. Looked trapped for the first time. "It was temporary," he said. The word traveled through the room and died. Laughed then, one short stunned sound. "My wedding is temporary theft." Ugh. She threw the bouquet at him. It hit his chest and fell to the floor, white roses scattering across polished wood. The documentary team filmed everything. I almost admired their professionalism. Rushed toward, not Grace's absent chair, not me, not the facts on the screen. Always the person who had done damage but was crying nearest to her. "You monster," hissed at me. I turned. For years, that word might have found a soft place. Not anymore. "Your daughter stole from mine," I said. "Pick your monster carefully." His father took the microphone. "This event is over," he said. No one moved at first, because endings rarely announce themselves so plainly. Then the room erupted. Guests stood, phones appeared, shouted at the videographer, sobbed in a way that sounded angry enough to survive, tried to reach me but I stepped away. My phone buzzed. "Grace, did it happen?" I looked at the ballroom. Flowers, candles, exposed theft, a groom unraveling under lights he bought with my daughter's future. I typed back, "Yes." A few seconds later, she replied, "Good, bring cake." I found outside near the lake. The wedding had collapsed behind us into clusters of shouting and whispered phone calls. Somewhere inside, his father was demanding vendor records. Was telling anyone who still listened that he had been ambushed. The documentary crew was arguing with the venue about ownership of footage they had accidentally turned into evidence. Stood under a tree wrapped in string lights, arms around herself, her champagne dress bright against the dark water. For a moment, she looked like the woman I married. Not because she was innocent, because memory is cruel and keeps flattering portraits in storage. "You played my voice," she said. "You used my signature." She flinched, in front of everyone. "You did it in secret. That was your choice." She turned toward me, mascara streaked. "Grace will never forgive me now." I waited. Nothing else came. Not I hurt her. Not I stole from her. Grace will never forgive me. Even then, the wound that mattered most to was the consequence landing on. "I don't know what Grace will do," I said. "You could have handled this privately." We tried. Offered $75,000 over 5 years in silence. He was trying. He was bargaining with stolen money. "He's my brother. She's your daughter." Covered her mouth. Her shoulders shook. I wanted to feel nothing. I failed. 18 years do not evaporate because a bank camera tells the truth. I still remembered her sleeping in hospital chairs, labeling medication bottles, singing softly to Grace when pain made our daughter furious at the world. That woman had existed. So had this one. Both truths stood under the string lights, and only one of them could be allowed near Grace's future. Lowered her hand. "If goes to prison, Mom won't survive it." There it was. Consequences orbiting the same sun. "Grace may lose her therapy program," I said. "Does that rank anywhere?" His eyes flashed. "Don't act like she's helpless. She shouldn't have to be helpless to deserve protection. You always make me the villain." "No," I said, "you keep auditioning." She slapped me. Not hard enough to injure, hard enough to end something. For a few seconds, only the lake moved. Stared at her own hand like it belonged to someone else. Ugh. I stepped back. "Do not come home tonight." Her face shifted from shock to anger. "It's my house too. Then I'll leave with Grace. You can't take her from me. She is 17. Ask her where she feels safe." Looked toward the building, toward the chaos she had helped create, toward the brother she still could not stop choosing. "My family needs me," she whispered. I nodded. Finally, honesty. "Then go to them." I walked away before my grief could negotiate. On the drive home, The slap warmed across my cheek. I did not touch it. I wanted to remember exactly how little truth had to do before called it violence against herself. Grace was waiting in the kitchen when I came in. She had changed into sweatpants and was sitting cross-legged on a chair with a fork ready. "Cake?" she asked. I held up the box slice I had stolen from the dessert table during evacuation. She inspected it. "Vanilla, that tracks." I laughed, then almost cried. Grace noticed the mark on my cheek. Her face changed. "Mom." "Yes." She looked down at the cake. "Did you hit back?" "No." "Good." We ate the cake directly from the box. It was dry. Grace made a face. "My money bought this." Apparently, not enough of it went to flavor. She smiled, then the smile faded. "Is she coming home?" "Not tonight." Grace nodded, absorbing another permanent thing quietly. After she went upstairs, I sat alone in the kitchen with the empty cake box between my hands. My phone kept buzzing. Reporters, relatives, unknown numbers. Helena, Nora, asking if I was okay in the careful language of coworkers who have seen the internet start moving. By midnight, the first clip hit social media. Not the evidence, not confession. A 10-second video of throwing the bouquet at. The caption read, "Groom exposed for stealing from disabled niece during wedding." By morning, the story had escaped the family. Good. The family had proven too small to hold the truth. But the internet found us by breakfast. By 8, 3 local news vans were outside's townhouse. By 9, bouquet throw had 2 million views. By 10, someone had posted the bank lobby audio with subtitles and dramatic music I hated immediately. By noon, strangers who had never met Grace were calling her an icon, an angel, a victim, a queen, and a lawsuit waiting to happen. Grace turned off her phone after 20 minutes. "I liked being obscure," she said. "I'm sorry. You didn't post it." "No, but I lit the room where people filmed it." She considered that. Fair, but the room needed lighting. The internet wanted simple shapes. Was the parasite? Was either gold digger or innocent bride, depending on which clip people watched first. Was harder for them, so they split her in half. Manipulated sister or evil mother. I became dad of the year to people who had not seen me fail to notice Grace shrinking at Thanksgiving. Public opinion is not justice. It is weather. Still, weather can flood a basement. By the end of the day, his father filed a civil claim against. Lake Estate turned over complete payment records. The notary retained criminal counsel. His attorney requested settlement discussions. Sent no messages to Grace. That was the one that mattered. At 6:15, Grace asked, "Has Mom called you?" "Yes, but not me." "No." She nodded like she expected it. I hated for making our daughter unsurprised by neglect. Helena arrived that evening with takeout and a folder. She did not ask permission to sit at the kitchen table. People carrying restitution strategy get seating privileges. The exposure accelerated everything, she said. Grace looked up from her sketchbook. "That means good, right?" "It means pressure. Pressure can be good if managed." "What happens to the money?" I asked. "Some vendor recovery. Venue may return a portion to avoid litigation." His father is motivated to prove his funds were separate, which means he'll help trace S. The frozen accounts contain more than expected. "How much?" $89,000. Grace blinked. He had $89,000 but offered $75,000 over 5 years. Helena smiled without warmth. "Now you understand civil negotiation." The first real break came 2 days later. "Called me." Her voice was hoarse, stripped of bridal polish. "I didn't know it was Grace's trust at first," she said. "At first." A pause. "I found out after the second deposit." I said nothing. Told me had access and it was a family fund. He said Grace had more money than she would ever need, and that was controlling it to punish. "She did not call me you. She had moved me into evidence." "Why didn't you stop?" "Because my father had already invited everyone," she said. "Because I was embarrassed. Because I wanted the wedding. Because I told myself it would be fixed before anyone got hurt." "At least you know what you told yourself." She inhaled unevenly. "I have emails talking about the payments, saying the trust was family-controlled, saying Grace would never miss what she didn't know was there." The room around me became very quiet. "Send them to Helena." "I already did." "Why tell me?" Was silent for a long time. "Because I watched Grace's painting clip." Grace's school speech had leaked too. She said adults call theft temporary because they plan to apologize later, continued. "I think I was doing that. It was not enough, it was more than most." "Then don't apologize later," I said. "Tell the truth now." She did. Emails changed the case from a family dispute with fraud to a coordinated pattern with knowledge. His line about Grace never missing what she didn't know landed hardest. When Helena read it aloud, Grace stood from the table and walked outside without a coat. I followed. She stood in the yard under a bare maple tree, breathing hard. I knew Grandma didn't like the trust, she said. I didn't know she didn't like me. I wanted to correct her, to soften it, to say loved her badly. Then I remembered the danger of softening sharp things, until children cut themselves trying to hold them. Feelings do not define your worth, I said. Grace looked at me. That's not the same as saying she loves me. No, I said, it is. The wind moved through the tree above us. Grace nodded once. Okay, she said. But it was not okay. It was simply named. Disappeared for 9 days. Not fully. Men like never vanish into hardship, they vanish into other people's guest rooms. He stopped posting, stopped calling, stopped sending statements through attorneys that used phrases like unfortunate misunderstanding. His townhouse went dark, filed to annul the marriage license before it could be registered. Told relatives was receiving support. Support turned out to be a lake cabin owned by one of his cousins. The sheriff found him there after he missed a court-ordered document production deadline. The arrest video was short and humiliating. In sweatpants, unshaven, asking whether cameras were necessary while standing in front of a refrigerator stocked with craft beer. The internet devoured it. I did not watch twice. Grace did. Is that wrong? She asked. No, it feels wrong. Then stop when it stops helping. She closed the laptop. The restitution hearing was scheduled for a Friday morning. Came with a lawyer and the expression of a man confused that consequences had formal architecture. Came alone, hair pulled back, no ring. Grace chose to attend. I worried. Helena warned her it could be painful. Grace listened, then said, so was not knowing. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. No dramatic wood paneling. No thunder. Just benches, fluorescent lights, and people who had dressed carefully for the collision between private shame and public record. His lawyer spoke first. He described stress, family pressure, business losses, and genuine intent to repay. He called a loving uncle who made catastrophic financial decisions under emotional strain. Grace whispered, he should paint, that's a lot of color. I almost lost composure. Then Helena stood. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. She walked the court through the timeline. His forged signature, his vendor invoices, wedding deposits, emails, statement, the frozen accounts, the offer of $75,000 over 5 years while possessed more than that in recoverable assets. The language of family, Helena said, was used repeatedly to disguise unauthorized access to a protected trust created for a minor with documented medical needs. Protected trust. Minors. Medical needs. There it was. The boring language that could hold what emotional language had failed to protect. Stared at the table. When the judge asked whether she wished to speak, she stood slowly. For one foolish second I hoped. I made decisions I regret, she said. Grace's hand tightened around mine. Continued. I believed I was helping my family during a crisis. I did not understand the legal consequences. Grace let go of my hand. Not dramatic, just release. The judge asked, did you understand the money belonged to your daughter's trust? His mouth trembled. Yes. Did you understand your husband had not authorized the amendment? Yes. Did you sign his name? A pause. Yes. I heard Grace inhale. The courtroom did not explode. No one shouted. No music rose. The truth entered the record in 3 small yeses. Then stood. He looked at the judge, not at Grace. I intended to repay everything, he said. The judge asked, with what funds? Swallowed, future business revenue. The judge looked at him for a long moment. Mr. Vale, future hope is not restitution. Grace wrote that down in the margin of the program. The court ordered immediate liquidation of recoverable assets, vendor clawbacks where possible, continuation of account freezes, and a structured restitution judgment. Criminal referral remained pending. His access to the trust was permanently removed. I remained sole trustee, with Grace added as consultative beneficiary upon turning 18. It was not everything, but it was something with teeth. Outside the courtroom, approached Grace. Can we talk? Grace looked at her mother for a long time. Not today. Please. You had 11 months before court. Cried. Grace did not. That was when I saw the shift. My daughter had not stopped hurting. She had stopped offering her hurt as a doorway back in. Called after us from the courthouse steps. Nate, this didn't have to go this far. I turned. Yes, I said. It did. You just thought later would arrive before consequences. For once, had no answer. Later had finally run out. The house became quieter after moved out. Not peaceful. Quiet and peaceful are cousins, not twins. Peaceful has softness. Quiet can be a room holding its breath because it has forgotten what noise is safe. Took half her clothes, the espresso machine, 3 framed prints, and none of the art Grace made after age 12. I noticed that last and wished I hadn't. Grace noticed too. She took the beach watercolor, she said, standing in the hallway. You made that when you were 9. I know, it was before the accident. I did not know what to say. Grace looked into the empty space on the wall. Maybe that's the daughter she wanted to remember. The sentence stayed in the house for days. Divorce papers followed. Attorney requested equitable division, temporary spousal support, and mediation. Helena recommended a separate family lawyer, so I hired one. My life became calendars. Trust litigation, divorce meeting, therapy consultation, school event, forensic accounting call, dinner if remembered. Grace started therapy again, with a provider paid through emergency recovered funds. The first week, she hated it. The second week, she hated it more specifically. By the third, she came home and said, "Doctor says betrayal grief is still grief." She sounds smart. She's annoyingly smart. That's the best kind. Grace rolled her eyes. She also says I can miss Mom without minimizing what she did. I leaned against the counter. And can you? No. But apparently that's why she gets paid. We learned new routines. I learned which nights Grace wanted company and which nights she wanted me to knock once, leave tea outside her door, and go away. She learned that I could burn rice in 3 distinct ways. We both learned that grief becomes easier to carry when no one in the house is actively gaslighting you about its weight. The trust recovery moved slowly. Vendor money returned in pieces. The venue refunded a portion under reputational pressure. The florist fought hardest, which Grace found hilarious. Of course the flowers have lawyers, she said. Frozen accounts yielded more. Returned gifts she could legally prove were purchased with tainted funds, including a watch, had given her engraved with "Forever Starts Now." Grace suggested we auction it under the title "Fraud Starts Earlier." I considered it. The largest recovery came from, not voluntarily. Her emails established she had encouraged to move money through vendor accounts and had received $22,000 labeled family reimbursement. Her attorney insisted it was a loan repayment. Helena produced messages showing knew the source. Settled within 48 hours. The check arrived with no apology. Grace held it by the corner as if it smelled. Grandma money. Recovered trust funds. Grandma money sounds more cursed. We deposited it anyway. By late summer, the trust balance had climbed back above $287,000. Not whole, not close, but alive. Grace got into the GATE training program. On the first day, I sat in the clinic waiting room with a paper cup of coffee going cold in my hand, exactly as I had 10 years before. This time Grace walked out sweating, furious, and triumphant. I hate everyone, she said. Progress. Annoyingly. In the parking lot, she stopped beside the car. Dad. Yes. I'm glad you did fold. I looked at her. The sun was behind her, turning the flyaway hair around her face gold. For a second, I saw every version of her at once. 7 in a hospital bed, 17 in a courtroom, somewhere future and freer than either of us could imagine. I'm sorry I ever did, I said. She nodded, accepting the apology without making me perform it. Just don't again. I won't. That night, I took down the empty hooks where missing pictures had hung. Grace helped. We patched the holes badly, painted over them worse, and laughed at how obvious the repairs were. That wall looks guilty, Grace said. It has a lot to answer for. We left it imperfect. Some repairs should show. Sent the documentary 6 months later. Not publicly, not at first. A private link appeared in my email with the subject line, "You should see this before anyone else does." I almost deleted it. Grace said, "Open it." You sure? No, but I'm nosy and traumatized, which is basically a research method. We watched together in the living room. The documentary team had not wasted the footage. They had built a 42-minute film titled The Wedding That Was Paid For with a Lie. It began with glossy shots of lake, flowers, water, sunlight, dress. Then it shifted, bank documents, the bouquet throw, shouting, confession playing over close-ups of empty chairs. Then appeared in an interview filmed months later, wearing no makeup and no performance. I wanted the beautiful version so badly, she said, that I ignored every ugly fact that made it possible. Grace paused the video. Well, she said, that's annoyingly honest. We kept watching. did not excuse herself. She admitted she knew something was wrong after the second deposit. She admitted she let embarrassment matter more than grace. She said had taught her to think of consequences as temporary obstacles to the life she deserved. Then the screen cut to email. Grace would never miss what she didn't know was there. Grace stood and walked to the kitchen. I paused the video. After a few minutes, she said, "Keep going. You don't have to. I know." The documentary ended not with, but with Grace's painting temporary, had obtained permission from the school, not from us, which annoyed me until Grace said, "It's okay." Said, the girl they stole from understood the story before the rest of us did. The final shot was the empty wedding arch being dismantled. We sat in silence when it ended. "Do you hate it?" I asked. Grace thought for a long time. "I hate that it exists," she said. "But if it exists, I'm glad it tells the truth." Had included a note beneath the link. "I'm releasing this only if you and Grace consent. Proceeds, if any, go to the trust or to a disability legal aid fund of Grace's choice. I know that doesn't fix what I helped do. I'm trying to stop making later my favorite word." Grace read it twice. "Can we send proceeds to legal aid?" she asked. "It's your decision." She nodded. "The trust is getting repaired. Other people might still need lawyers." That was Grace, hurt not hardened, sharper not smaller. The documentary, released 3 weeks later. It reached more people than the bouquet clip, because it had what outrage usually lacks: receipts. Comments poured in from people telling stories about parents draining college funds, siblings stealing settlements, spouses calling protected money family money. Helena said her firm received so many inquiries she had to create a resource page. Grace refused interviews. Did one. I did none. Criminal case moved forward. Accepted a plea arrangement tied to restitution and probation, with the divorce continuing separately. Gave one statement through her attorney expressing pain for all involved, which Grace rated 0 stars, too much fog. At school, Grace's painting won a regional youth arts award. The newspaper wanted a quote. Grace gave them one sentence: "Temporary harm becomes permanent when everyone agrees not to name it." I framed the article. She pretended to hate that. One evening after the documentary had been out for a month, Grace found me in the kitchen. "People keep saying you got revenge," she said. "I've seen that." Is that what it was? I considered lying, but she was too old for comfort disguised as morality. At first, maybe part of me wanted that. And now I think revenge was the door. Restitution is the room. Healing is somewhere past both, probably badly labeled. Grace smiled. "You sound like Doctor. I'll recover." She leaned against the counter. "I'm glad you played the audio." "Me too. But I'm more glad you stayed after." That sentence found a place in me deeper than victory. Because exposure had taken one night, staying was the work after. Asked to meet Grace 10 months after the wedding. The request came through therapists, lawyers, and then finally a handwritten letter addressed only to Grace. She read it alone in the art room. I waited downstairs pretending not to check the clock every 30 seconds. When she came down, she handed me the letter. "You can read it." "Are you sure?" She said real things this time. That was not yes, but it was close. His handwriting was messier than I remembered. The letter was 3 pages, no excuses at the beginning. That mattered. She wrote, "I stole from you. Not borrowed, not mishandled, not helped. Stole." She wrote, "I used your father's signature because I knew he would protect you better than I was willing to." I had to sit down after that line. She wrote, "I told myself you had enough because admitting you needed the trust meant admitting I was taking from a child who still needed help." Grace watched my face. "She had help writing it," she said. "Doctor says that doesn't make it fake." "No," I said. "It makes it edited for honesty." Grace agreed to meet in a therapist's office. I drove her there, but she asked me to wait outside. For 90 minutes, I sat in the parking lot, hands on the steering wheel, fighting every instinct to protect her from a conversation she had chosen. Parenting a nearly adult child means learning that protection sometimes looks like staying outside the door. When Grace came out, she looked exhausted but upright, followed 10 steps behind, older in a way the calendar could not explain. She did not approach me. "Good." Grace got into the car. "How was it?" I asked. "Weird." "Good weird or bad weird?" "Accurate weird." We drove in silence for a while. Then she said, she apologized without asking me to make her feel better. "That's good." I didn't forgive her. "That's allowed." I told her maybe someday I'll want dinner. Not holidays, not birthdays, dinner. "That's also allowed." Grace looked out the window. She cried after I left, not before. I understood what she meant. Had learned, maybe too late, that tears could not be the first person into the room. The divorce finalized in spring. Signed over her share of several marital assets toward trust restitution. I kept the house because Grace wanted one stable roof until graduation. Received a sentence involving probation, restitution, and restrictions on financial management. It was less than I wanted on angry days, and more than he believed possible on arrogant ones. Documentary proceeds funded a legal aid grant for minors and disabled beneficiaries in family trust disputes. Grace named it the temporary fund, which Helena called both inappropriate and perfect. Never apologized. She sent a Christmas card with a Bible verse about mercy. Grace pinned it to her corkboard under the label Exhibit A, passive-aggressive seasonal material. I worried sometimes that humor had become her armor. Doctors told me armor is not the problem if a person can take it off around safe people. Grace took it off sometimes. In pieces, late at night. In the car. Once in the cereal aisle, when she saw a mother helping a little girl choose rainbow marshmallows and cried so suddenly I had to abandon the cart. Healing is not linear. It is not graceful. It is not content. It is your daughter crying in aisle 6 because love was supposed to be simpler, and you standing beside her with a box of cereal in one hand, unable to fix anything except the fact that she is not alone. On graduation day came. She sat in the back row. No, just hands folded, eyes on Grace. Grace saw her. She did not wave. After the ceremony, approached with one small bouquet. Not white lilies, wildflowers. I'm proud of you, she said. Grace accepted the flowers. Thank you. That was all. It looked small. It was enormous. That evening, Grace placed the bouquet in a jar on the kitchen table. Don't make a face, she said. I'm not. You are making your complicated dad face. I have many faces. Too many. She adjusted the flowers, then stepped back. I don't know what she gets to be now, Grace said. You don't have to decide today. I know. She looked at the wildflowers. But I get to decide. Yes, I said, you do. For the first time, that sounded like money returned, law enforced, and something even harder won. Joyce. Grace turned 18 in July. On her birthday, we went to the bank. Not the old branch. Grace refused to ever enter it again, which I considered reasonable. We went to a new office downtown where had transferred after the investigation and personally arranged the restructuring. Grace wore a navy dress and boots she said made her look like a courtroom witch. I wore a suit because she told me not to embarrass her by looking like I had accidentally wandered in from mowing the lawn. Greeted Grace first. That mattered. For years, adults had spoken around her about her trust, her care, her needs, her future. This time, the banker looked directly at my daughter and said, "This is your trust. Today we formalize your advisory role." Grace sat taller. The documents were straightforward. I remained trustee until the age in the original structure. Grace gained review access, quarterly consultation rights, and veto power over any non-medical discretionary distribution. Helena had insisted. I had agreed before she finished the sentence. When Grace signed, her hand did not shake. Afterward, slid a printed balance summary across the table. Recovered funds, vendor returns, asset liquidation, settlement, divorce contribution, restitution payments to date, plus market growth. $392,418. Not whole, but breathing. Grace stared at the number. That's mine. Yes, said, protected. Grace looked at me. And watched. And watched, I said. We went for pancakes after because Grace said financial trauma required carbohydrates. She ordered blueberry and ate half of mine too. What are you going to do first? I asked. With the trust. With being 18. She thought seriously. Buy spray paint and vandalize my own canvas. Legal rebellion. Exactly. In August, Grace moved into a small dorm room at the Art Institute 2 hours away. We packed too much. She unpacked badly. I pretended not to notice she was scared. She pretended not to notice I wanted to sleep in the hallway like a guard dog. Before I left, she handed me a small canvas wrapped in brown paper. Don't open it until home. I obeyed. Mostly because she threatened to block me. At home, in the quiet house that no longer held its breath, I unwrapped the painting. It showed a bank vault door standing open. Inside was not money, not documents, not gold. A window. Light coming through. On the back, she had written, "It stayed open because you did." I sat on the kitchen floor with the painting in my hands and cried in a way that would have embarrassed Grace. So I was grateful she was not there to mock me lovingly. Saw Grace once a month that fall. dinner only, neutral places, no pressure. Sometimes Grace came home irritated, sometimes quiet. Once she came home with a sweater bought and wore it for 3 days. I learned not to interpret every object as a verdict. Paid restitution slowly, bitterly, publicly enough that Helena could monitor it. Never him, obviously, and became an uncomfortable advocate for financial transparency in weddings, which Grace said was niche but useful. Remained. Some people do not transform, they simply lose access. The documentary continued to circulate, but Grace stopped tracking it. She had new work, new friends, new arguments about color theory, new pain management routines, new mornings where her life was not organized around what had been stolen. That was the victory no clip could show. 1 year after the wedding, Lake Estate sent an invitation for a charity event supporting disability legal aid. Grace laughed for a full minute. "Absolutely not," she said. Then she painted them a piece to auction anonymously. It sold for $14,000. She donated all of it to the temporary fund. When I asked why, she shrugged. Because temporary harm should meet temporary money and lose. I did not pretend to understand all of her logic. I trusted the direction of it. On the second anniversary, I opened the trust portal out of habit, then stopped myself. Grace had access now. Grace had agency. My job was not to guard every door forever. It was to make sure the keys were no longer hidden from the person who owned the room. I closed the laptop. A message from Grace arrived a minute later. "Stop checking the balance, Dad." I stared at the phone. Then another message. "Love you though." Then a third. "Seriously, I can see login alerts." I laughed alone in the kitchen. The house sounded different when I laughed now. Less surprised. People ask sometimes whether playing the audio at the wedding was worth it. They want a clean answer because stories are supposed to end where the villain falls. I tell them the truth. The wedding was not the ending. It was the moment the locked door opened loudly enough that everyone heard the hinges. The ending, if there is one, is quieter. It is a trust account that stayed protected. A daughter who signs her own documents. A father who learned that peace is not the absence of betrayal, but the refusal to keep building around it. It is knowing that family is not the person who calls your silence maturity. Family is the person who hears you say no and protects the no with you. Grace's trust stayed open. So did her future. And this time, everyone who mattered had the password.